Now, when we talk about going back to the basics, listen, you've got to focus on the controllables. This is the stuff that only you can control. I think that a lot of the time we lose our inspiration because we are focused on all kinds of things we cannot control. And we look at things and we get disheartened and we get discouraged. But all of those things are outside of your power. And so why are you losing your inspiration over the things you cannot control? I totally understand if you're losing your inspiration over stuff you can control. But over the stuff that you can't control, you just have to develop the mental discipline to not give your inspiration over to the non-controllables. You got to come back to this place where you just recognize the universe is a big place. Like there's way more things you cannot control than you can. Hey everybody, I hope you're doing amazing. I want to spend a little bit of time with you here today talking about finding your inspiration again. Now, I am sharing this with you today because the truth of the matter is that dark periods come to all of us. I don't know a single person who hasn't experienced some dark period, particularly when you look back at the last 5 years. And I don't just want to focus on the pandemic. I mean, that for sure was a dark period for so many. But I think that oftentimes the dark periods that we have may not even be apparent to anybody. They may not be this big, economic downturn or this big global pandemic. Maybe the dark period in your life is something that emerges as you begin to unpack the trauma that you've lived through. Maybe the dark period in your life is when you first launch your business and you're trying to get to that first 6 or 7 or 8 figure sales number. Maybe the dark period in your life is when you're going through challenges and stress and difficulty with your kids, right? Maybe the dark period in your life is when you're walking through the death of the people that you love, or the death of a dream, or the death even of a pet. It's amazing how we all experience dark periods. And myself, I've been through several. And I have come to expect dark periods now. It used to be that I kind of looked for rainbows and sunshine and blooming tulips, and my heart was broken because it just didn't work out that way. I'd like to think that now I'm a little bit more mature. And that just means that when dark periods come, I just recognize that's a part of the cycle of life. And you might say, well, you don't know. I'm the guy who doesn't have any dark periods. Well, listen, every beautiful day ends up with nighttime, right? Every summer goes to fall, goes to winter. And so if you're that person who's in a dark period right now, don't beat up on yourself, because maybe it's just that you're in a night season. But listen, morning will come. I'll tell you what, weeping may last for the night. The old proverb says, but joy comes in the morning. And so when do dark periods come? Well, I've discovered in my life anyways, that dark periods come, number one, we get dehumanized. Like when other people treat us and dehumanize us in a very negative or toxic way, of course, that leads to dark periods. It also happens sometimes just when we get distracted, so we're chasing after our vision, we're chasing after our dream, and all of a sudden this little shiny object takes us off track, and pretty soon we are 2-3 months into this new shiny object only to realize that we're way off base for where we really want it to be. Dark periods also come when our dream gets delayed. A lot of the time you're just kind of having to wait, and you're just kind of having to hurry up and wait. And that can lead to a dark period, because then you start, finger pointing, second guessing, like, is it about me? Is it about you? Is it about them? And, really it kind of leads you to this dark period, because sometimes there's just forces at work that are way beyond your control. I've also discovered that dark periods come when we get damaged maybe by other people, maybe damaged by the hardship of life. And so here's the truth, friends. Dark periods are going to come. And what do? Well, they emotionally exhaust us, right? I mean, when you go through a dark period, it's kind of like your emotions, your mind, your tank gets completely depleted. And here's the problem with emotional exhaustion is when you get tired, you start fighting battles that don't really matter to you, right? That's the crazy thing about it. I did a lot of work over the years in addictions and mental health. And one of the well-known acronyms, particularly in addiction and substance abuse, is this acronym called HALT, which is HALT. In other words, we're most vulnerable when we're hungry. And that's not just like physically hungry, but that's true too. But when we're mentally hungry, when we're emotionally hungry, even spiritually. We're most vulnerable when we're angry, HALT, H-A. We're most vulnerable when we're lonely, and we're most vulnerable when we're tired. And if you look at your own life, like when have you made the worst decisions? When have you done the dumbest things? It's typically been when you've been hungry, when you've been angry, when you've been lonely, when you've been tired. And so, if you are looking to get through a dark period, what you got to try to recognize is, where is my vulnerability point? Now, the good news is breakthrough is right around the corner. I can't predict the timing of your breakthrough, but I can promise you that if you're in a dark period right now, your breakthrough is right around the corner. Like I said, weeping may last for a night, dark periods may come, but joy is in the morning. I mean, we live in Canada, and I'll tell you what, you look at any of the trees, and we're shooting this in around the middle of April, and it's crazy to think that right now, even our trees don't have any life on them. There's actually snow on the ground, if you can believe it, where we live still. And so the untrained eye would look at the trees and say, oh, those trees are dead. You know why? Because they've shed their leaves. But anyone who knows anything about trees knows those trees aren't dead at all. As a matter of fact, they shed their leaves so that they can push their roots even deeper into the soil, so that when the winter comes, they can actually have a steady source of supply. And so sometimes in your life, you might look at it and say, well, Abe, you don't understand the breakthrough. It's not coming for me. All my leaves have been shed. Here I am. But I got great news for you. The breakthrough is just around the corner. Tell you what, winter is just about to break, and spring in your life is coming. And so how do we find our inspiration again? Can I just give you 3 simple things? I like to call it the ABCs of finding your inspiration again. The very first thing for finding your inspiration again, and this one is for sure the first one because it's most important, and that is alignment. If you're going to find your inspiration again, you have to be aligned. Now, I don't want to oversimplify this, but, imagine this train. And it's like high-speed train. It's the best train ever. Like, you go to Europe, you go to China, people are like, oh, the high-speed trains, Japan. I mean, here in Canada, we don't have high-speed anything. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like begging for high-speed trains. We don't have it. But let's just say you build the most beautiful high-speed train ever in human history, right? But if that train is off the tracks, then you have a non-functional entity. And there's a set of tracks in your life. For you, I don't know what it is. There's a set of tracks for me. There's a calling. There's a purpose. There's a sense of destiny for my life and for yours. And as long as this locomotive is on the tracks, this guy is unstoppable. He is high speed. I'll tell you what, but the moment I'm off track, the moment I'm out of alignment, well, it doesn't matter how great my locomotive is. Like, oh, he's got the high-speed train. Who cares? Because you're not going anywhere because you're not on the track. Listen, what this means is sometimes we get lost in our work. And what happens when we get lost in our work is we forget our why. I'll tell you what, your why, the reason that is driving all of the other things that you're trying to do in your life, is so important. And I've said this many times. I'll say it again. When you lose your why, you can say goodbye. When you lose that sense of purpose and focus and meaning, I'll tell you, it is so easy at that point just to give up. And it doesn't matter how mature you are. It doesn't matter how experienced you are. It can be very easy to just get so lost in the work that you forget your why. And so what I've discovered in my life is I need to have regular moments where I realign, where I reconnect. And yeah, sometimes your why might need a bit of tweaking. Sometimes the why that you had 5 years ago is going to be different than the why or the purpose or the mission that you have right now. But I'll tell you, you've got to keep yourself calibrated. You've got to keep yourself aligned. You've got to keep yourself on track. I don't want to see you over here as this beautiful locomotive and the tracks are way over here. Tell you what, when you bring those locomotives and those tracks together, what you end up with is an unstoppable force, an unbelievably powerful force. And so listen, if you want to find your inspiration again, it begins in that place of alignment. Now, I love Dr. Viktor Frankl, and I've been teaching people on finding purpose and meaning for so long, but I have to step back as like a little child when I bring Dr. Viktor Frankl into the conversation, and the conversation is about finding your purpose. Because Dr. Frankl survived Nazi death camp. Dr. Frankl was a psychiatrist. Dr. Frankl taught and practiced these kinds of things for 60, 70 years professionally. And if you've never had an opportunity to read his book, please search it out. It's called Man's Search for Meaning, Dr. Viktor Frankl. And in that book, he does a brilliant job having survived, the Nazi death camps and having been a survivor of the Holocaust and having seen all that horrible, horrible stuff. What he said is that people who were in the Nazi death camps who lost their sense of meaning or purpose, they would die much quicker. In other words, they would just give up than the people who maintained a sense of meaning and purpose. Now, I want you to think about that for a moment, right? What that tells us is that purpose leads to perseverance. Purpose leads to tenacity. Purpose causes you to keep on fighting. But when you don't have your purpose, why would you fight if I don't have any purpose? And so what he said so brilliantly is that there are three things or three ways we can find our purpose. And I'm positive that for somebody listening to this and watching this video here today, that this is transformational, this moment. This is why, this moment right now is why you're watching this video. Three things that can help you discover your purpose. He said the first thing where you can find your purpose is in love. Now that can be the love of your family. That can be the love of your spouse. That can be the love of your partner. But what he discovered in these Nazi death camps is that a lot of people stayed alive for no other reason than love. I have to stay alive because when this war ends, my family's going to be counting on me. And what are they going to do if they don't have me? And so, you don't have to go, on a mountain and get tablets like Moses did, tablets of stone from God to find your purpose. Maybe your purpose is just to love people. Okay. The second thing that he discovered that you can find your purpose is in a work or creating a thing. And I love this because for so many people, especially in the digital economy, your purpose is your work, right? It's kind of like, I have these creative capacities in me. I have all this innovation. I'm an artist. Maybe I'm a writer. Maybe I'm a speaker. Maybe I'm a technology person. Maybe I'm into biotech. Maybe I'm into pharmaceuticals. But whatever it is, your work can give you purpose, right? And I think sometimes we think, well, no, I have to go to the mountaintop and I have to go find an ashram somewhere and do some hot yoga or some cold yoga or whatever to find your purpose. But man, hey, maybe you're already finding your work in your hands. I mean, a bird doesn't pray about his purpose. He looks at his wings and he says, this is what I'm called to do. A fish is not, praying, what's my purpose? They're not seeing life coaches or shrinks or psychologists. They have the capacity to glide through the water. Where is your glide? Where, like that bird, are you soaring? That's your purpose. The third thing that he discovered, or the third place that Dr. Frankl said, we might be able to find that alignment, that sense of purpose, he said, was in suffering or pain. Now, this one's difficult. Because none of us deserve suffering or pain in that sense. And certainly Dr. Frankl, coming out of a Nazi death camp, knew something about suffering and pain. But what he was kind of saying there was this: you have no idea what your pain or suffering will lead to for somebody else. In other words, in my own life, I went through quite a bit of pain growing up. And that pain has given me the unbelievable opportunity to speak to so many hundreds of thousands of people that I never would have been able to speak to before, and actually to be a part of their healing journey. Why? Because they're not looking for somebody who's got academic knowledge. They're looking for somebody who's got some lived experience. And, I'm not saying that you shouldn't try to stay out of places of pain in your life just so that you can get the benefit of the pain to help other people. But what I'm saying is, if you're going to go through the pain anyways, and sometimes you will, then you might as well use the pain to heal and help other people. And don't take my word for it, by the way. This is Dr. Viktor Frankl. He talked about finding your purpose in love, finding your purpose in your work, or finding your purpose in pain. And so the very first thing we have to do to find our alignment again is find our inspiration again, is we've got to get or find our alignment. That's the A. Now, the B of finding our inspiration again is to get back to the basics. A lot of the time, we're trying to figure out our inspiration and we're getting all fancy, like I see people spending tens of thousands of dollars on coaches and going to conferences and going here and going there, trying to get their inspiration again, when to me, sometimes we just need to get back to the basics. What do I mean by that? We tend to overcomplicate things. Am I the only one? Take something very simple and absolutely complicate it. Now, when you complicate things, what happens is, again, you can't really see the forest for the trees. You're so in the middle of it that you can't actually have the perspective to understand where you need to be and what's up and what's down and what's what and what's not. And so when I say getting back to the basics, what do I mean? Can I give you the most important basics, the three basics? The first is the controllables in your life. All of these start with the letter C. The second is cash, and the third is calendar. Okay, so I want to break these down. Now, when we talk about going back to the basics, listen, you've got to focus on the controllables. That's the first C. This is the stuff that only you can control. I think that a lot of the time we lose our inspiration because we are focused on all kinds of things we cannot control. And we look at things and we get disheartened and we get discouraged. But all of those things are outside of your power. And so why are you losing your inspiration over the things you cannot control? I totally understand if you're losing your inspiration over stuff you can control. But over the stuff that you can't control, you just have to develop the mental discipline to not give your inspiration over to the non-controllables. You got to come back to this place where you just recognize the universe is a big place. There's way more things you cannot control than you can. So why are you giving your mental and emotional health away to the things you can't control? The prayer of St. Francis was, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. That's the non-controllable. The courage to change the things I can. That's the controllable stuff. So you got non-controllable and controllable. And then I like to reword it, the coach to know the difference. Now, St. Francis said the wisdom, but a lot of the time, people do need a coach to say, look, dude, stop focusing on all the stuff you can't control. Get back to the basics. Just control the things that you can. The second basic that I want to share is, and this one here is very meaningful, it is calendar. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Own the moment. All you've got is 24 hours a day, just like me, just like Steve Jobs, just like Martin Luther King Jr., just like Mother Teresa, right? And so if all I got is 24 hours in a day, I think a very reasonable question to ask is, am I owning the moment? Am I squeezing the most out of the available opportunities that I've been given? Of course, I'm going to lose my inspiration if I look back over my calendar and I realize I've just wasted all kinds of time. And so listen, if you are using the time that you have well, then you will not lose your inspiration. I can promise you that. There's nothing more discouraging than looking back over your calendar and realizing that you wasted all kinds of things. I mean, why do you think so many people today are talking about no regrets? It's like they're trying to convince themselves not to have regrets. It's like, I can maybe talk myself into not having regrets. Listen to me. Life is filled with regrets. That's the bottom line. You're never going to get to a place that you have no regrets if you're psychologically honest. Okay, now if you're just living in self-deception, you'll have no regrets. But if you're like a real person and not some AI-generated, motivational speaker or something like that, you're going to have regrets. The question in life is not, am I going to have regrets? The question is, can I minimize them? Right? Like I don't want on my tomb to be could have been, should have been, might have been, I don't want to, unexplored potential on my tombstone. Like that's stupid. Own the moment. So back to the basics, Focus on the controllables, focus on your calendar, and the third is focus on your cash. Now, you're like, but I don't have any. Listen, I've been there, okay? What do I mean by this? Manage your money as well as you can. Your focus should not so much be trying, at least initially, to get all kinds of more cash. Your focus should be to manage what you have well. No better example of that than the current idiotic Canadian government, okay? Today is March the 17th. Yesterday, let me just check, is it March the 17th? It is. Yesterday, our dumb Canadian government, and I don't know, maybe they'll censor me for this, but they released their annual budget. And the Canadian government, a very small economy, Canada's a very small country, they decided they needed to spend $480 billion, Canadian dollars, which is a lot of money. And, here's the thing. The reason they're spending all this money, if you can imagine, they're adding $40 billion in new spending this year. And the deficit, which is the difference between the money coming in and the money going out, is going to be $40 billion. Now, why are they spending that money? What they're telling us, and we should believe them because they're the government, and the government always has our best interests at heart, is they're telling us that they're reinvesting in the Canadian economy. And those millennials and those Gen Z, and they need help for housing, and we're gonna borrow a bunch of money so that we can build houses, which, by the way, they've been promising for years, they've never done. So they're lying. But here's the funny thing. If you're a millennial or a Gen Z, you should never be more pissed off than right now, because guess who's going to pay for all the money they're borrowing today? It's going to be you, right? The way that you invest in your future is not by overtaxing your people. Do you know that the average Canadian pays 55%, 60% if you own a home, 65% if you own a home? You are paying tax upon tax upon tax. If they just said, look, I believe that the people can handle the money and manage the money better than the government, and they just gave our money back to us, then we would do much better. Why? Because a dollar in your pocket, in your bank account, will for sure be better managed than a dollar in the bank account of the government. You know that as well as I do. Now, why am I saying this? Because everything in your life comes down to how you manage the resources that you have. Tell you what, if you don't manage well the resources that you have, you won't have any more. I went through a personal bankruptcy about 15 years ago. I literally lost everything. I had nothing. I couldn't even get a credit card. At that time, the lady that I was dating, who I'm so grateful is now my wife, she was an immigrant to Canada. She wasn't even a Canadian citizen. She was on a temporary work permit. She could get a credit card in Canada, and I couldn't. She came from a very poor country, and I couldn't even get a credit card. And I remember at that time, at first, like getting so angry and feeling sorry for, like, all the self-pity party, all of this stuff. But what I started to realize is that I have one ability and one ability really only, and that's to make money. Okay, I didn't have any money, but I have the ability to actually make money. And then as I went out and started making money, I would do a speaking gig, I took a job here, I did this, I did that, I did all kinds of things, just like you. You do what you got to do to put money in the bank account. Then, rather than me spending like I was like a 6 or 7 figure guy, because at that point I wasn't, I actually lived within my means. And now I'm happy to say I'm that 6, 7 figure guy. But the reality is, way back then, I couldn't actually spend more than I took in. And of course, if I am spending more than I'm taking in, that's going to drain my inspiration, because every month I'm not going to see assets being generated or assets growing. I'm only going to see liabilities and debts increasing. And that will suck your soul. I'll tell you what, millennials, Gen Z, I feel so bad for you. You need to get rid of this Trudeau government, because they're destroying your future. They're destroying your children's future. The average interest payments on the debt in Canada are more than we're spending on healthcare. You're telling me that's going to build a better economy? That's investing? That's stupidity. Anyone with half a brain will tell you that. But the problem is, when you want to buy votes, you'll even bribe people with their own money, not even money they have, but money that you're putting them on the hook to borrow. Tell you what, that same principle applies in our lives. Get really simple. Get back to basics. Take a look at like my controllables. Take a look at my calendar. Take a look at the cash. And yeah, is it going to mean you might have to tighten your belt for a bit? Absolutely. Like if you make $45,000 a year, you can't afford a $65,000 car. Sorry. Do you know what I'm saying? But that's just the way it is. If you are that person who is on a place where right now it's tough, hang on. Okay? But don't make it worse by spending out of control. I promise you, if you manage your money well, you work hard, you do the thing, you're going to get where you need to go. It's not an easy process, but take it from somebody who recovered from bankruptcy. And honestly, I'll tell you what, I'm so blessed. I'm so blessed in every way. And so I want to encourage your heart. The path forward is not easy, but it's the right one. And when you take the right path, what will happen is you'll generate the results that you need. So the ABCs of finding your inspiration, again, number 1 is alignment. Number 2 is basics. Get back to the basics. But the third thing we need to do to find our inspiration again is connection. We need connection. Now, what is connection? Connection is about the fact that success is not a solo project. We struggle together. We strive together and we thrive together. And so here's the question. When you look at the 5 relationships that are closest to you right now, I'll tell you, are they feeding your soul? Are they calling you higher? Are they encouraging you? Are they challenging you? Are they inspiring you? Because if not, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to throw them aside. But what it does mean is you got to make sure that you add more friends, more safe connections. Tell you what, there's nothing more powerful, I think, on planet Earth right now than the Flourishing Tribe. You can check us out, certifiedflourishingcoach.com, where we have an entire community of people who want to connect with you, who want to support you, who want to help you get to that next level so that you don't have to do it alone. So if you're looking to find your inspiration again, A, alignment with yourself, with your dreams. B, get back to the basics, friends. And C, connections. Build those healthy, solid, encouraging connections, and you'll be unstoppable. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I hope we'll see you in our next episode. Remember, certifiedflourishingcoach.com.